Do you tense up when you get to a tight driving hole? Do you hit your driver better on the range than you do on the golf course? In this episode, I want to go through 3 mental game strategies for increasing your odds of hitting the fairway. Hello, everybody. I am Josh Nichols. I've been playing competitive amateur golf for over 20 years, and I've been a golf psychology coach for over 6 years. And across those 20 years, something that I have personally struggled with is driving accuracy. Now, I'm not even a long driver of the golf ball, so driving it accurately has always been really, really important to me. But because it was so important to me, I put a lot of pressure on myself. So I would make these kind of tight, steery, guidey swings, and I would end up hitting it shorter and more crooked. So across my golf playing career, I've learned through experience ways to improve my driving accuracy, but I've also learned as a golf psychology coach the psychological reasons for this, and through research and evidence-backed strategies, there are ways to improve your odds of hitting the fairway. So let's get into it. Strategy number 1 is to let go of the need to hit the fairway. We've got to lay it out right here. In order to make it easier to hit the fairway, you have to let go of needing to hit the fairway. When you need to hit the fairway, you add pressure, right? You say, I need to hit this fairway. Well, that increases the pressure. But why does that increase the pressure? Why is that bad? Well, when you say I need something, you make not getting it unacceptable. You actually create a scenario where you are afraid of not getting what you want. And anytime you're afraid of something, what do? You tense up, you get jerky, you get quick, and no secret, oftentimes when I'm on a tight driving hole, I don't slow down and make a nice smooth swing. I get jerky and quick, just like our bodies do when they're in a fear scenario, right? When you are experiencing something that is a threat to you, you tighten up. You don't relax and get slow, you tighten up. Same things happens on the golf course. When you say, I need to hit this fairway and missing this fairway is unacceptable. Even if you don't say outright that missing the fairway is unacceptable, when you have this feeling, this deeper belief that I need to hit this fairway, or I will be a terrible golfer, or I will make a bogey, or I will make a double, or it's unacceptable to make a double, or I will shoot a bad score again, or I'll get off to a bad start, whatever. When you have that deeper belief that needing to hit the fairway is what is needed, then you create a fear of not getting it. So through that fear, you get tense. Through that tension, you make steery, guidey swings, you make bad swings, and not only do you hit it shorter, but you hit it more crooked. So how do you let go of needing to hit the fairway? Well, you have to create that underlying belief that there is no need to hit the fairway. You have to get to a place where you can say, you know what? I want to hit this fairway, but it's okay if I don't, right? I don't actually need to hit this fairway. I can miss this fairway and still do something. I am not just a bad golfer. I'm not the worst golfer ever. I'm not going to necessarily shoot a terrible score. No score is contingent on hitting this fairway here. I do not actually need to hit this fairway. So by taking away that need, there's not a fear of the unacceptable thing, right? Now missing the fairway is not unacceptable, right? I can accept it. I can miss this fairway and I'll be okay. So by letting go of this need, now you create this peace, you create this openness, you create this freedom to pursue what you do want. Instead of making this avoidant swing to avoid what you don't want, now you can make a pursuant swing to pursue what you do want, which is the fairway. So to summarize this into a sentence, it would be, I want to hit the fairway, but it's okay if I don't, right? That's as simple as it is. You go from, I need to hit this fairway, and what you're not saying there is, and if I don't, then bad things will happen. You switch that mentality to, you know what? It would be cool if I hit this fairway, but it's okay if I don't. I will be okay if I don't. I can handle it. I can manage it if I don't. So that's mental game method number 1. Now let's get into mental game method number 2. And that is picking a target area, not a small target. So the concept of aim small, miss small has been a thing in golf for decades, maybe even a century or however long at this point, right? When you aim small, you make your misses smaller, right? If you aim at this huge area and you miss your huge area, then you have a huge miss. But if you aim at this tiny little area and you miss your tiny area, you only miss a little bit. And that seems right. And I have bought into this at times. But the thing is, this doesn't work for everybody. Some people, this does work, right? So, caveat here, aim small, miss small does work for some people. But the International Journal of Golf Science did a study in 2018 on about 100 golfers, and they were all hitting drives, and they were testing the mentality of this many golfers has the mentality of let's pick a really tiny target, and they told them, okay, pick a really small target out there. And then the other one was more of an area to aim at, right? So we could think of it as aim at a tree in the distance versus aiming at the entire fairway or the left side of the fairway or the right side of the fairway. So they did that test, and what they found was the frequency of drives hit into the fairway was lower for the golfers who picked the small target. The golfers who had the target area actually hit the fairway more often. And the study speculated on why this is, and I have my own speculation and experience of why this might be, is because when you have the really narrow target, you create sort of a perfectionism. You create I have to be perfect in order to hit my target. That is a tiny target. And the only way to hit that tiny target is to make a perfect golf swing. And sometimes you do, and that feels really good, right? When that ball falls directly on where you are aiming, that feels awesome. But man, that is so rare. It's so hard to hit a tee shot at 270 yards or whatever, 100 miles an hour golf swing exactly where you're trying to go. But it's much easier to hit a target area. So when you view your target as a whole area, just like releasing the need to hit the fairway creates freedom, widening the target creates a freedom because now you have a larger area you're hitting into. It's the concept of, shooting a basketball into a regular size hoop or shooting a basketball into a swimming pool, right? And that's dramatic. That's a much bigger difference. But you have much less freedom. You're much more tight when you're shooting into the tiny little hole versus the freedom that you feel when I've got all this room. So when you have this wider open area, you have this space. And the reason why that is because you have a wider margin for error. When you have a wider margin for error, you're not as there's not as much of a need to be perfect. I heard this really good analogy one time from the book Golf Beneath the Surface by Raymond Pryor. You've heard me talk about this book before. He gives the analogy of a car driving on the highway. So, you're driving on the highway, normal lane on the highway. It's not super wide, but it's wide enough for you to drive and, have a little bit of movement left to right. Right? So there's some margin for error, and you can drive pretty freely. If you've been driving long enough, you can drive very freely to the point where you can, do other things and multitask, whether or not you should. That's a whole different scenario. But you have this margin for error when you're driving on the highway. And he brings up an alternative of imagine if the road was the exact width of your tires, and on either side was a river of molten lava. So there is zero margin for error. If you swerve just even a little bit, your car falls into the lava. Which one of those two scenarios are you going to be more freed up in? Well, you're going to be more freed up in the one where you have more margin for error. So when you perceive your target as microscopic, then you kind of set up the scenario where I have no margin for error. I have to make a really, really good golf swing or I'm going to miss my target. As opposed to the really wide open area that you're aiming into, you've given yourself margin for error. Now you have created a scenario where I'm allowed to hit less than a perfect drive and I'll still be okay, right? It'll still fall within my standards. So again, this comes down to kind of our belief about what's a good drive, right? Needing to hit the fairway or needing to hit my target or opening up my target so that I can believe that my target is big enough that allows me to make margin for error. So all of this is kind of getting into our psychology of opening ourselves up, things that give us more freedom. So we got mental game strategy number 1, letting go of the need to hit the fairway. Mental game strategy number 2 is to pick a large area, not a small target. And mental game strategy number 3 is to accept the final result. Now this one is pretty self-explanatory. When you hit a tee shot, no matter where it goes, you need to have an acceptance of it. You need to be able to say, wherever this ball goes, I'll be okay. Or after you hit the tee shot, okay, it went there, that's okay. And acceptance doesn't mean you're happy. Acceptance doesn't mean you're, dancing with joy, you're smiling, and, that was the best drive ever, and you're faking this positivity. That is not what acceptance means. Acceptance means being able to see the shot for what it was, right? Instead of saying that was a terrible drive that I sliced into the right trees, you say that was a ball that went there, and this might have been the thing that caused it. And whether or not you use that information for the next tee shot or later for practice, that doesn't matter. You're able to see that tee shot as just one individual shot, not as this terrible thing that you did that means that you're driving the ball bad today. Because what we often do throughout a round of golf is we build up baggage from the tee shots so far. You hit a bad drive on number 1, you slice it right. Number 2 is a par 3, so you get through that one. Number 3 is another tight hole, so you're scared of missing it right, so you overcompensate and hit it left, and that's a bad drive. And before you know it, you're labeling yourself as, this is a bad driving day. I'm hitting my driver bad today. So maybe you even put the driver away, or you just make more and more scared swings all day with the driver. But if you switch that from this harsh judgment and this compiling of tee shots and this interpretation that this means I'm a bad driver of the golf ball or it's a bad driver day, if you switch that interpretation to, that was just one shot, right? I have not suddenly lost my ability to drive the golf ball. That was one shot that went there. That was probably caused by this. Okay, that was a shot that went there. That was caused by me, I was a little bit too tight. I was probably a little too in my head on that one. I probably felt like I had a little too strong of a need to hit the fairway. So if you open it up and say, you know what, that ball went there, and I can handle it no matter where this ball goes, right? You're creating a situation where I will forgive myself for a mistake. And again, this gets back to kind of our larger theme here. You're giving yourself permission to fail. You're giving yourself margin for error. You're giving yourself forgiveness, right? That's ultimately what this is about. If you know you're going to forgive yourself for a mistake, then you're freed up to just do what you got to do. And okay, I made a mistake. That's okay. Pretty much the most common way that we proceed scared when we play scared is because we're afraid of the mistake, right? If there was no consequence for a mistake, then we wouldn't play scared. That's why we drive it better on the range than we do on the golf course, because the consequences for a mistake on the range are there's very few. But on the golf course, there are actual consequences, like, hitting into the rough and potentially making a bogey. So we have to reduce the intensity of the mistake. We have to take away the kind of self-punishment of the mistake. We have to introduce acceptance. So we've got our 3-part mental game strategy to increase your odds of hitting the fairway. Number 1 is to let go of the need to hit the fairway, which is to say, to be more okay missing the fairway. And strategy number 2 is to pick a target area rather than a tiny target. And strategy number 3 is to accept the end result. Be forgiving of yourself for a mistake. So I think a really good companion episode to this would be my episode titled How to Commit to a Golf Shot. That goes exactly along with this. If you like this concept, you should go check out that episode. All right, everyone, thanks for being here. I'll catch you in the next one.